This is the Atheist Guide to Spiritual Awakening. I'm your host Walter, and this episode is about the creation of a mind. One day we arrive on this world as a small infant. Our genetics program us for randomly moving our arms, for gathering information from our environment through our senses, for feeling what gets in touch with our hands, with our skin, for hearing noises, for seeing lights, shadows. So how do we turn from that early stage into a full-blown adult that knows what to do, that knows how to interact with others, that stores increasing amount of information, that basically learns continuously? In this episode I will try to build an overall picture of how that might work from a logical perspective. My goal is not at all to make it a full-blown scientific and neurological essay. It's really purely from a logical learning and model of the mind type of viewpoint. So imagine being that infant. You don't know much. You just know how to maybe avoid pain or to feel pain. You randomly move around. And one day you hit the bars of your bed. That is not feeling great. So suddenly there are neurotransmitters and hormones that activate in your body, and this tags the information as something relevant. It hurt. So now I know that moving around sometimes can hurt. But it was not too bad. So I continue moving around. And I hit again. It seems that when my hand gets in touch with that wooden thing too fast, then it hurts. New information. And as we progress in this acquisition and detection of patterns in the surrounding world and in our internal world, we start associating hand movement doesn't hurt. Hand movement, while it hits something, that hurts. So maybe I should try again a bit slower. It hurts less. So we progressively build a model of our environment, of our body, of the interaction between our environment and our body, associations between sounds that we hear, for instance, the voice of our parents and the arrival of food, which helps alleviate the hunger that we feel from our inner world, and so on and so forth. We also carefully watch the things that are in our immediate surrounding, like the faces of that parent that takes care of us. And it seems that when she smiles, she's also giving me caresses, and these caresses feel good. So let me try smiling. When I smile, she smiles more, and she starts tickling me. This is nice. So progressively we build up a set of patterns: the smile, the pain, the hunger, and what comes after that as a logical consequence, or alternatively what we could do to make it happen again. So one way of looking at a human mind is to say that it's a pattern detector on one hand, and associated with other patterns like inner feelings, or even action patterns like moving a limb, moving a foot, moving something else. And it's a long chain of associations. Like, as we progress in the building of this associative mind, we will start detecting words. Maybe whenever mother looks at me and talks to me, she starts by putting on that little word, Walter. But she also talks about something called mom. Hey, here is mommy. Hey, mommy will quickly get out of the room and come back. So in the set of random noises, we start identifying patterns that repeat. and again get associated with pleasant or unpleasant situations. So we build up slowly a model of language, and we try to imitate them because, well, if mother speaks, maybe I can do. And we try. Blah, 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 blah. That was not very much the same. Let me try again. Ma, 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 ma. Ma, ma, ma. That sounds like something she said a little bit more. We need to realize that an infant's brain is particularly flexible in learning these patterns and these associations between sensorial, internal and other states, and is building constantly a more and more refined model of the world, of the actions, of the feelings, of the internal states, like is it fear, is it pain, is it hunger, is it happiness, is it a sense of connection through oxytocin, for instance. And as the learning goes on, the patterns and the associations become more and more refined and detailed. Now, what happens if, let's say, at the stage where the toddler learns to walk, he breaks a vase that was on the table? Well, maybe mommy was not that happy and she started shouting. And shouting felt weird. It hurts a bit the ears. It feels like she doesn't have her smiley face, which feels nice and connecting, but she's suddenly more distant. And we build emotional associations as well as practical and physical ones. This phase of extreme flexibility of the brain ends at around age 25. But the most important learning phases of a child are between 0 and 6 or 0 and 9-year-old. So what happens now if something dramatic happens in that phase? Let's start with small dramas. Oh, mommy tells me that she is pregnant. Oh, but what is that? What is pregnancy? Oh, she explains me that there is another child that will come in our household. Well, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know yet. And then that sister shows up, and suddenly mommy is not focusing as much as she used to on my needs. She needs to split her attention with that newborn, and that newborn is noisy. Why is that noisy newborn getting all the attention that I was used to get? Oh, but I realize it's not that bad, because daddy takes over, and now I discover this bearded guy that is also able to give me my pleasure, my laughs, my needs, my giggles, my play. But what if, for instance, that dad doesn't have time because he's working a lot, because he has a tough life, and he doesn't have the time or energy to feed my needs while that sister is taking away the attention of mommy? Well then, maybe I feel alone. What is that feeling of being alone? I was never alone so far. But I was not alone before, and now I'm alone. So I am abandoned. And what is also worthwhile realizing is that at a very young age, the frame of reference of a child that experiences changes in their environment is not very subtle. It doesn't have much experience, so he's saying, okay, sister arrived, mommy disappeared, sister bad. But maybe then there are also positive things entering into my life as a toddler. I go to the kindergarten and there are other nice people, so I start discovering variety of humans, and the time I lost with my mother is compensated with new, exciting and fun times with other people and other infants. So nothing is that bad. And also mommy realizes that I still need her attention. After all, I'm only 2 years old, for instance. So when sister is sleeping, she's dedicating her attention to me again. So I'm not abandoned. Now, if other negative experiences compound on top of the previous negative experience, we might develop patterns and associations that are actually overgeneralizing something. Like, for instance, my sister arrived, I got abandoned. That girl in the kindergarten hit me and I had pain. That lady that was supposed to take care of me was not very good at her job and she left me alone. So maybe the association that starts to form there is that all these creatures with longer hair than me are bad. So maybe women are bad. So there starts to be a kind of feedback loop between my previous experiences and how I will approach the next one. I will have an anticipation, because that's what the mind does. We are constantly trying to predict the future and to see how reality matches it. So I will have an anticipation that my next encounter with a girl will also be a bad one. But what does it mean to have that expectation? It means that I will be maybe not as happy looking, my face will be a bit more grumpy, anxiety will show, and that girl with her own experience will maybe start not trusting me or not being as open. So my own behavior based on my own experience will impact my new interactions, and either something positive happens and then it will clear out the generalization I made, or it will cause more negative experiences and reinforce the negative associations that I made between girls and the general outcomes of my interactions. And this goes on and on and on and on across the whole of life, but in a very intense way between 0 and 25. So imagine now that the childhood of someone was not that standard, that maybe some really traumatic events happened, and that the traumatic events impacted so much the behavior of that child that they got reinforced and reinforced by further negative experience, up to the point where the adult that enters the world of adults, let's say age 25, has really illogical, from a general perspective, associations, but that for him or her are the only logical ones, because what we find logical is what we learned, not some absolute truth. Now, when is there a new opportunity of learning something different from what we always considered logical? Well, it's when there is suddenly a cognitive dissonance between our past experience and the new experience that comes. Every time our brain experiences a cognitive dissonance, there is a spike of dopamine happening, which makes that specific experience even neurologically marked at the neuron level for further reprocessing during sleep. So basically, every time some of our existing knowledge, which we use to predict the future, contradicts what really happens in the future or in the present moment that we were predicting before, we take that biologically as an opportunity to learn something new. So just for the sake of this discussion, it's not really proven that this is the case. I will call a memory engram the collection of what we remember from some event, what feelings were associated to that event, and what story we internalized as the explanation of that event in our mind. In order for new information to come in and cause the cognitive dissonance, the dopamine spike, and the revisiting of the previous event in a new light due to the new experience, there is something like a relative strength of the past experience versus the new one that comes into play. So, for instance, if the past experience of a person is that women really hurt bad because it was a beaten children by his or her mother, then there needs to be something really, really intense coming in from another woman that cancels or balances out that impression that women are dangerous. The extreme cases of overgeneralized pattern matching that have deep impact on our lives is what we call trauma. Trauma doesn't happen only in childhood, but with the extreme flexibility of the brain, childhood trauma is the one that leaves the most difficult to reprogram or to amend types of pattern matching that we do. The basic types of traumatic events that happen to a child are abuse, which is basically subjecting a child to some type of behavior or experience that he or she is not ready at that stage to deal with. Neglect, which is not giving the child some basic needs that need to be fulfilled, like not feeding him regularly, not giving him tenderness, not giving him explanations, parking him in front of an iPad instead of taking care of him, not explaining him what happens, but just assuming that he will understand. Abandonment, which means to let the child alone to cope with a world he's not ready to cope with. The impact of these forms of trauma on a child are completely dependent on the way the rest of his learning and pattern recognition and associations are built. As an example, if a parent is loving in general to a child but is extremely brutal in the way they punish, then maybe there will be an association of normalizing this type of behavior. So basically, daddy loves me, but he hits me hard when I do something bad, so that's a normal behavior. Another way of internalizing the impact of a violent parent can also be to rebel against it. So basically, every time someone is displaying violence, it triggers anger into the person that went through that experience as a child. And it's very important to realize that we all react differently to the same kind of external events based on the whole collection of our past experiences. So when we judge others for their behaviors, it's helpful to realize that we don't know what built them up to this stage. So understanding them or trying to understand them, finding a way to explore their past, especially if someone that matters to you, is a way better approach than judging them for their behavior. And judgment is especially problematic because as soon as you categorize someone as the bad person, the violent person, the angry person, the sad person, well, the deal is done. You know what they are, so you will not approach them with further curiosity, but you put the sticker on their forehead and now you will deal with them as the person you decided they were. But that is not only true for other people, it's also true for yourself. If you had often angry outbursts towards others, then you will say, okay, I am angry, Walter. What can I do about it? I know I'm bad, but that's what I am. But as we saw in the previous episode, considering ourselves as anything rigidly stable and unmoving is not a right way of looking at what a human being is. We have the potential, at least, to constantly change and evolve. But the more we label ourselves with identifiers, the less likely that change is to happen. The other fallacy that we live with before we realize is that people know why they behave the way they behave. Well, I was describing how patterns and associations are built, but there are also a lot of defense mechanisms that are built into ourselves by our experience. If you always do something in a certain way, then the narrative in your own mind will tend to justify or normalize that behavior. Why? Because if it wouldn't, then suddenly we would start judging ourselves even more harshly and say, I'm a bad person, I should not exist, and that can lead to depression and suicidal thoughts and other things like that, which are not exactly productive for being an adult. So what can we do about that? How can we go deep inside ourselves and explore what we are, how we were built, whether it serves our happiness, our value, or how we impact the world, and to change it if it doesn't. And that's where the part of ourselves that I was describing in the previous episode, the watcher, the silent watcher, comes in handy. If we manage to constantly observe, or as much as possible to observe, our own inner workings, then we learn about ourselves and we can have a chance to understand who we are and why we are the way we are, and progressively develop methods that we will discuss a bit further in an episode about healing, that allows us to progressively make ourselves a more functional, more happy, and more productive human being. So how can we take the seat of the silent watcher and observe ourselves as much as we can? Well, that's the goal of meditation. I don't intend in this episode to discuss much about meditation techniques, because there are many, and if you are interested in meditation, it's useful that you find the one that works the best for you, depending on your type of mind, on how visual you are, on how hyperactive you are, and many other factors. But if you want me to talk in a dedicated episode about specific meditation techniques, at least the ones that I'm using and I know of, please leave a comment, and if there are enough people asking for it, I will make a dedicated episode about some meditation techniques. For now, between all meditation techniques, the common feature is to help you focus your mind from the silent watcher's perspective. So to be able to observe without being completely caught in the narrative that your mind is living at that specific time, and to be able to objectively analyze what's going on. There are two main skills that we need to develop in order to properly meditate. The first is a combination of focus and willpower, meaning to be able to have the mind do one thing at a time. And the second one is to constantly, using that focus and willpower, drag back the attention from the story that is unfolding in reality or in our mind back to the silent watcher seat. I will link in the show notes some good material to give some hints on how to improve focus and willpower, and also a great book from Jack Kornfield, who is at the same time a Buddhist monk and a Western trained psychiatrist, so has a very unique perspective on using meditation for dealing with our own mind. I highly recommend that you go through these materials that I will be linking, because at least for me they were extremely useful for making progress in understanding myself and then slowly changing what I didn't like in me. But the highlights I want to leave you with for now are: first thing, train your focus. So try to do one thing at a time, and to in your daily life whenever possible, and to dedicate your attention to what you're doing, because in our current way of life we are constantly interrupted by the phone, by other people, by the phone call, by the meetings, and so on. So focus is really not something that we develop very well. The other very important skill I recommend you to keep in mind is to try to stay calm when you meditate, meaning getting grumpy at your mind wandering around will just increase the restlessness of the mind and go against the goal of meditation, which is to learn to watch in a calm state to understand. And the final thing is, please remember that we all have different minds. Some of us are very visual, some of us are very physical, we like to move. Some of us are very calm, some of us are restless, some of us are very intellectual. So try the different practices that you can hear about and see which one fits your type of thinking. And before I forget, something else that is, in my opinion, key here is that the goal of meditation is not to withdraw from life in order to find a quiet space when we can relax, but it's to develop a skill set that we can bring back in life itself in order to become smarter and smarter at living. So that's it for today. This was the episode of The Atheist Guide to Spiritual Awakening, dedicated to the development of a mind and to meditation. Looking forward to see you soon, and meantime, please like, share, comment, and ask me anything if you feel like.